There are queens history celebrates, and there are queens history pities. But among all the women who wore crowns, only a few carried something heavier than royalty, something deeper than duty, something darker than destiny, a curse not made of magic or superstition, but created by bloodlines that demanded perfection, dynasties that demanded obedience, and empires that demanded sacrifices so deep they consumed the souls of the women trapped inside them. This is the story of those women, women born into palaces that felt like prisons, women who were admired by millions but loved by no one, women whose entire lives were shaped by the weight of royal expectations and the sharp edge of royal blood. And among them, one woman's tragedy rises above the rest, not because her suffering was greater, but because she tried harder than anyone to hide it behind a smile. Her name was Elizabeth of Austria, but the world remembers her as Sisi. Imagine a young girl running barefoot across green fields. Her laughter is easy, her hair falls in wild curls, her dress is simple, light, and worn from climbing trees. She is not a princess yet. She does not know the meaning of power. She does not know the meaning of isolation. She does not know that she is about to become the most admired woman in Europe, and the most unhappy. Sisi was born into a family of Bavarian nobles, free-spirited, artistic, emotional people who loved poetry more than politics, and freedom more than rules. But freedom ends the moment a girl becomes a queen, and Sisi's freedom ended when Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria noticed her instead of her older sister. He was supposed to marry Helene, serious, obedient. Instead, he fell in love with Sisi, young, radiant, innocent, unprepared for the world he would bring her into. In that moment, Sisi didn't gain a crown. She lost her life. The Austrian court was a machine, cold, rigid, suffocating. Every movement, every breath, every word was controlled by rules older than the empire itself. Sisi arrived as a 16-year-old girl and was immediately swallowed whole. Her dresses were chosen for her. Her meals were measured. Her behavior was monitored. Her servants reported her every action. The palace walls were gold, but they were walls. And behind those walls, Sisi discovered the first truth of royal life. A queen belongs to everyone except herself. But the greatest enemy Sisi faced was not the court, not the empire, not even the responsibilities of being empress. Her greatest enemy was her mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie. Sophie believed Sisi was too childish, too emotional, too soft to be empress. She took control of Sisi's children, decided how they should be raised, and refused to let Sisi participate in the most important part of motherhood. Sisi, who loved her children more than anything, was told she was unfit to raise them. Imagine the pain. Imagine giving birth and then being told your child now belongs to the empire, not to you. This wound stayed in Sisi for the rest of her life. As the years passed, Sisi learned to smile for the public and cry in private. She became famous for her beauty, so famous that poems were written about her hair, her waist, her skin. But underneath the makeup and jewelry, she was breaking. She starved herself to maintain a tiny waist. She exercised obsessively. She refused to age. She hid behind perfection because perfection was the only thing she could control. Her beauty became her armor, and then her prison. Every portrait of Sisi captures a woman who looks calm, distant, almost untouchable. But behind that calmness was a storm she never escaped. Still, the world adored her. Crowds cheered wherever she went. Poets compared her to angels. Her face appeared in newspapers and books across Europe. Yet Sisi herself felt invisible. Everyone loved her image. No one loved her. She once wrote in her diary, "I am a bird in a golden cage, and my wings have been clipped." She traveled endlessly, escaping Vienna, escaping obligations, escaping memories. She fled from palace to palace, country to country, changing locations but never changing her fate. Because no matter where she went, she carried the same truth. A queen can run from her kingdom, but never from her crown. But the tragedy that shaped Sisi more than anything was the death of her son, Rudolf. Rudolf was brilliant, sensitive, modern, and painfully similar to Sisi. He hated the court. He hated its rules. He hated the expectations forced on him. He inherited Sisi's heart but not her strength. His depression deepened. His marriage collapsed. His political future fell apart. And one night, in a hunting lodge called Mayerling, Rudolf made a decision that ended the future of the empire. He died in a tragic suicide, together with his young lover, Marivet. News of his death shattered Sisi's soul. She was never the same again. A part of her died in Mayerling that day. The rest of her died slowly in the years that followed. Sisi wore black for the rest of her life. She avoided mirrors. She avoided celebrations. She avoided joy. People saw her as mysterious, elegant, almost supernatural. But the truth was simple. She was grieving. Grieving her children, grieving her freedom, grieving the life she never lived. And then, the curse claimed her final moment. During one of her travels in Switzerland, Sisi was walking near Lake Geneva when a man approached her. He looked like a passerby, ordinary, calm, harmless. He moved closer, as if to bump into her. No one noticed anything strange. But in his hand was a thin, sharpened needle file. He plunged it into Sisi's chest. She didn't realize she had been stabbed. She thought she had fainted. She walked forward, collapsed, and only then understood that her life was draining away. The blade had pierced her heart. Her last words were, "What has happened to me?" And then silence. Sisi, the Empress of Austria, the most admired woman in Europe, died not in a palace, not surrounded by royalty, but on a simple bench by a Swiss lake. A queen killed by fate, by chance, by a single moment in a life filled with suffering. Her death was not dramatic. It was quiet, lonely, and painfully symbolic, because Sisi's life was never about glory, it was about grief, and her end reflected her truth. She had been hurting long before the knife touched her. Sisi's story is not just a tragedy. It is a warning, a reminder that beauty can hide pain, crowns can hide cages, and empires can hide broken hearts. But Sisi was only the first. The second woman in this documentary lived a life even more tragic, even darker, even more cursed by the bloodline and the throne she carried. Her name was Juana. History calls her Juana la Loca, Juana the Mad. But madness was not her curse. Her curse was love, and the family that destroyed her. Before history called her mad, before she became a legend whispered in dark palaces, before the world forgot her name, Juana was simply a young woman in love, and that love became the weapon that destroyed her. Her tragedy did not come from mental illness, it came from betrayal, it came from obsession, it came from a bloodline that valued power more than truth. Juana was born into the house of Trastamara, a dynasty already stained with violence, paranoia, and endless fights for the throne. Her mother, Isabella of Castile, was a queen made of steel, strong, strict, fierce, a woman who built Spain with her own hands. Her father, Ferdinand of Aragon, was a master politician, a man who believed that family was just another battlefield, in a home where love had rules and affection had consequences. Juana grew up in silence, learning early that feelings were dangerous. But even she could not imagine how dangerous her own feelings would become. When Juana was 16, she was married off to a man she had never met, Philip the Handsome, the charming Duke of Burgundy. People said he was the most beautiful man in Europe. People said his smile could hypnotize a room. People said women fainted when he walked by, but beauty is a fragile mask. And behind his perfect face stood a man whose greatest love was power. When Juana first saw Philip, their meeting was electric, not arranged, not forced, but immediate. She fell in love instantly, completely, dangerously, and for Philip, it was convenient. A queen who loved too much was easier to control than a queen who loved too little. Their marriage began with passion. Their nights were filled with fire. The young couple was inseparable. But passion is not the same as loyalty. Philip had lovers, many lovers, and Juana saw them all. Her heart broke each time she heard whispers of another woman leaving his chamber at dawn. She tried to win him back with affection, patience, tears, but Philip only grew colder. Her love became a chain. His beauty became a curse, and the more she loved him, the more he resented her. People around the court saw Juana's pain and called her crazy, but she wasn't crazy, she was heartbroken. Every betrayal tore pieces from her life, from her identity, from her sanity. And soon Philip learned how to use that pain for his own ambition. Juana was next in line to inherit the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, two of the strongest powers in Europe. If Philip could control her, he could control both kingdoms. He began spreading rumors. Juana is unstable. Juana is emotional. Juana cannot rule. Her own husband turned her grief into a weapon against her. And the worst part, her parents believed him, because in royal families, control is more important than truth. As the pressure grew, Juana clung to the only person she trusted, Philip. She loved him even while he betrayed her. She trusted him even while he destroyed her. Her depression deepened, her jealousy sharpened, her emotions spiraled, and history, always written by the powerful, recorded her suffering as madness. But the true madness belonged to the people around her. Then everything changed the night Philip died. He fell suddenly ill, fever, chills, pain, a sickness that swept through the camp and ripped him from the world at age 28. Juana's world shattered. She refused to accept his death. She refused to let him go. She stood by his corpse, holding his cold hand, whispering his name as if he could hear. When they sealed his coffin, she demanded it be opened again and again just to see his face one more time. People whispered, "She has lost her mind," but grief is not madness, it is love with nowhere left to go. From that moment, Juana was not a queen, she was a tool. Her father imprisoned her, claiming she was insane. Her son imprisoned her later for the same reason. Everyone used her madness as an excuse to steal her power. They locked her away in a cold monastery for 46 years. 46 years of darkness, silence, loneliness, and endless mourning. She was not allowed to speak to visitors. She was not allowed to see the outside world. She was not allowed to live or to die. The crown she never wanted became the chain that broke her. Juana did not lose her sanity because she was weak. She lost it because everyone she loved used her in their games of blood and power. Her mother used her. Her father used her. Her husband used her. Her son used her. Her kingdom forgot her. History called her Juana the Mad. But the truth is simpler. She was a woman destroyed by the people who were supposed to protect her. A woman cursed not by her blood, but by her loneliness. A queen whose heart was too human for a world that expected her to be anything but. And now, we move to the next woman, the most famous tragic queen of all time. A young girl sent to a foreign land, married into a world that hated her, crushed under the weight of a collapsing empire. The woman whose name still echoes through history like a warning. Marie Antoinette, before the crowds screamed her name in hatred, before the guillotine blade shined beneath the morning sun, before history turned her into a symbol of greed and excess. Marie Antoinette was simply a girl, not a queen, not a monster, not a rebel. Just a young girl born into a world she never asked for. She did not choose France. She did not choose the revolution. She did not choose her destiny. The crown chose her, and the crown destroyed her. She was 14 when she left Austria, a child forced to abandon her home, her friends, her language, her childhood. She crossed forests and rivers, surrounded by soldiers, guided by politics she did not understand. At the border, in a cold ceremonial tent, she was stripped of everything Austrian, her clothes, her belongings, even her dog. It was the ritual of becoming French. She stood trembling, barefoot, half-naked, terrified, as the ladies of France dressed her in the heavy fabrics of her new life. From that moment on, Marie Antoinette belonged to France, not to herself. When she arrived at Versailles, the palace was dripping in gold, crystal chandeliers mirrored halls, perfumed gardens. But beneath the beauty was cruelty. The French court was cold, competitive, filled with gossip, jealousy, fake smiles, and endless rules. Marie Antoinette was an outsider, a foreigner, a teenager, a pawn in a marriage meant only to create heirs. Her husband Louis was gentle, awkward, shy, and emotionally distant. She tried to love him. He did not know how to respond. She tried to be warm. He was locked inside himself. Their marriage was not a partnership, it was an arrangement of strangers. Years passed with no child. Courtiers mocked her. Pamphlets accused her. Rumors painted her as cold, barren, incapable. She was just a girl, blamed for the failures of a dynasty. So she escaped, not from the palace, but into dreams. She built a small village-like retreat called Petit Trianon, a place where she could breathe, laugh, be herself. She dressed simply. She gardened. She sang. She played with her children. She tried to find happiness in a world determined to deny it to her. But the people saw this not as innocence, but as arrogance. They thought she was mocking them, playing peasant while real peasants starved. Pamphlets turned her into a villain. Enemies called her names: Madame Deficit, the Austrian whore, the enemy of France. None of it was true. But truth doesn't matter when people are hungry, angry, and scared. A woman alone cannot fight an entire nation's pain. When the French economy collapsed and bread became scarce, the people looked for someone to blame. They did not blame the ministers. They did not blame the tax system. They did not blame corruption. They blamed Marie Antoinette. The famous line, "Let them eat cake," was a lie, a myth written to ignite hatred. She never said it. But once the story spread, the crowd believed she was laughing at their suffering. She wasn't laughing. She was begging her husband to make reforms that could have saved the kingdom. But Louis was gentle, hesitant, too slow for a nation on the edge of revolution. Marie Antoinette became the face of a collapsing regime. And when the people broke into Versailles, torches in hand, rage in their hearts, they shouted for her blood. She fled through dark holes, holding her children, running barefoot on cold marble, while rioters searched for her room to kill her. She survived that night, but something in her broke. She realized she would never again be seen as a woman, only as a symbol. And symbols are easy to destroy. They dragged the royal family from Versailles to Paris, like prisoners. Louis and Marie Antoinette were placed in the Tuileries Palace, beautiful from the outside, a cage from the inside. They were watched constantly, mocked, threatened, insulted. At night, the crowds outside shouted, "Death to the Austrian." Inside, Marie Antoinette held her children and whispered promises she knew she could not keep. Her son cried. Her daughter trembled. Louis stood helpless, a king who could not protect his family. No crown can shield a heart from the world's cruelty. The revolution tightened its grip. Then came the day that changed everything. Louis XVI was executed. Marie Antoinette watched the procession from her cell window, the sound of the guillotine echoing through the streets. She felt something inside her collapse, not fear, not shock, something deeper. The last piece of hope, leaving her forever. Her youngest son was taken from her, isolated, tortured, forced to accuse her of crimes she never committed. Marie Antoinette endured humiliation, mock trials, public hatred, starvation. She aged rapidly, the woman once admired for beauty now pale, thin, hollow-eyed. But even in that cage, she was graceful. Even in pain, she was proud. On the morning of her execution, Marie Antoinette walked through the crowds of people who once cheered her and now celebrated her death. She stepped onto the scaffold without trembling. She accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and whispered, "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." Her last words were an apology, not for crimes, not for politics, not for decisions, for stepping on a man's shoe. Even in death, she was gentle. The blade fell, the crowd roared, the revolution celebrated. But history remembers her not as a monster but as a woman trapped in the wrong time, in the wrong place, in a world that needed someone to blame for its own suffering. Marie Antoinette was not killed because she was evil. She was killed because she was convenient, One more queen remains in this documentary. One more woman whose life was shaped by the bloodline she inherited and the curse that followed her. A queen who watched an empire burn, a mother who fought to save her son, a woman who trusted the wrong man, a family destroyed by the secrets in their blood. Her name was Alexandra Romanov, the last empress of Russia, before the empire fell, before the palace burned, before the bullets echoed in a dark Siberian basement. Alexandra Romanov was just a shy girl with quiet dreams. She was born a princess of Germany, gentle, sensitive, religious, a girl who believed in miracles and carried her heart like fragile glass. But destiny chose her for one of history's harshest roles, the last empress of Russia, not by ambition, not by political hunger, but by love. Because the story of Alexandra began not in a throne room but in a ballroom. She met Nicholas Romanov, the heir to the Russian Empire, at a family gathering. He was polite, elegant, soft-spoken, a young man who looked more like a poet than a future czar. When he saw Alexandra, his world shifted quietly. He fell in love with her the way a candle is lit, soft, warm, inevitable. But Alexandra hesitated. Russia was not her world. Its people were foreign, its court was cruel, its expectations endless. And the Russian crown, shining, heavy, dangerous, was not just a symbol of power, it was a promise of suffering. She felt it from the beginning. But Nicholas begged. He loved her deeply. He wrote letters filled with longing, promising her happiness, safety, and devotion. And so, Alexandra said yes. She married the man she loved, and walked into a destiny that would destroy her. Russia greeted Alexandra with suspicion. She was German, foreign, reserved, shy. In a court that demanded charisma, she gave silence. In a culture that prized strength, she showed vulnerability. She was misunderstood from the start, seen as cold, arrogant, distant. But she wasn't. She was overwhelmed. The Russian throne was not a gift. It was a storm. And soon, the storm revealed its first lightning strike. For years, Alexandra could not give Russia a male heir. She gave birth to daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, beautiful, bright girls. But the court whispered, "Where is the son? Where is the future Tsar? Why can't she give us an heir?" Nicholas reassured her, held her hand, comforted her. But Alexandra blamed herself. She prayed, she fasted, she wept. Then finally, a miracle. A boy was born, Alexei, the long-awaited heir. The empire celebrated. Alexandra believed God had blessed her. But what she didn't know was that God had also given Alexei a terrible curse. Within months, Alexei began to bruise easily, bleed unpredictably, suffer agonizing pain. He had hemophilia, a rare genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting, a disease passed through royal bloodlines, from one cursed family to another. Every fall, every injury, every small accident could kill him. And Alexandra lost her peace forever. She watched her son bleed and scream through long winter nights, his small body shaking, his lips turning pale. She held him for hours, praying until her voice broke. Nothing mattered anymore, not the empire, not the court, not the world, only her son. She became desperate, consumed by fear, tormented by the whisper of death hovering over her child. And in her desperation, she reached for the man who would destroy her family, Rasputin, Grigory Rasputin, a wandering mystic, a man with strange eyes, a man wrapped in rumors and shadows. He claimed he could heal Alexei through prayer and touch. And somehow, strangely, mysteriously, Alexei improved when Rasputin was near. Science still doesn't understand it. Maybe hypnosis, maybe calmness, maybe coincidence. But to a mother who had watched her child almost die, it felt like salvation. Alexandra trusted Rasputin with her heart, her secrets, her son's life, and the empire never forgave her. Rumors exploded. People said she was controlled by him. They said she was weak. They said she was destroying Russia. They said Rasputin was sleeping with her. They said he ruled the throne while the Tsar blindly obeyed. None of this was true. But truth does not survive in a nation on the edge of chaos. Russia was drowning. Poverty, hunger, war, failed leadership, political corruption. And in the minds of the people, the villain was not the government. It was Alexandra, the foreign queen, the mother who trusted a mystic, the woman who loved too deeply and too blindly. Her love for her son became the fuel that burned the empire down. When revolution finally erupted, soldiers abandoned the Tsar, crowds filled the streets, the monarchy collapsed. Nicholas abdicated the throne to save his family, but nothing could save them now. The Romanovs, once a dynasty of absolute power, became prisoners inside their own home. Alexandra, Nicholas, their 4 daughters, and young Alexei were transported across Russia under guard. They lived in fear. Cold rooms, thin blankets, loud guards, no privacy, no hope. Alexandra held her son at night and whispered stories to keep him calm. Her daughters embroidered quietly to keep their minds from breaking. Nicholas tried to smile even when his hands shook. They tried to stay a family in a world that had decided their lives were a threat. The end came in the basement of the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. It was July 17, 1918. The family was woken suddenly and told they were being moved to a safer location. Alexandra knew, Nicholas knew, but they stayed calm for their children. The room was small, cold, lit by a single bulb. Alexei struggled to stand. Anastasia held his hand. Olga whispered prayers. Maria and Tatiana stood close. Alexandra stayed near Nicholas, her last anchor in a collapsing world. Then the soldiers entered. One read a short sentence about execution. Before Alexandra could turn to her children, the shooting began. Bullets echoed through the basement. The girls screamed. The room filled with smoke, chaos, blood, terror. The empire ended not with a ceremony, but with gunfire. Alexandra died holding her children. Her daughters died protecting their brother. Nicholas died trying to reach his family. The Romanov dynasty died in a single night. Alexandra Romanov's tragedy was not madness, or greed, or arrogance. It was love. Love for her son that led her to trust the wrong man. Love for her husband that made her ignore a collapsing empire. The love for her family that shaped every choice she made. Her story is not the story of a foolish queen. It is the story of a mother in a world where mothers had no power. A woman destroyed not by her errors but by the world around her. With Alexandra's fall, the age of empires ended. The age of queens ended. The age of royal women carrying curses in their blood and tragedy in their hearts slowly faded into history. But the echoes of their suffering still follow us because the story of cursed queens is not about magic, not about fairy tales, not about legends. It is about the price paid by women who were born into cages made of gold. And now only one final task remains to bring all these tragedies together in a closing narration that ends your documentary with emotion and power. Empires rise in sunlight, but they fall in silence. Crowns shine in portraits, but they weigh heavily on the women who wear them. History remembers kings as warriors, rulers, conquerors, but it remembers queens through their suffering. Behind every throne there is a woman whose story was written in shadows. A woman who paid a price for power she never truly controlled. Sisi, Juana, Marie Antoinette, Alexandra, for women born into greatness, yet destined for grief. For women adored by crowds, yet abandoned when the world turned dark. For women whose bloodlines promised glory, but delivered tragedy. Their stories are different. Their worlds were different. Their fates were different. But they shared one truth. The crown never belonged to them. Their lives belonged to the crown. Sisi tried to run from her cage, but the cage followed her until a blade found her heart next to a quiet lake. Juana tried to love with her whole soul, but love betrayed her and locked her away for a lifetime she did not deserve. Marie Antoinette tried to be kind, gentle, human, but a starving nation devoured her as if her death could feed them. Alexandra tried to save her child, her family, her empire, but in the end, she could save no one. These women were not cursed by magic. They were cursed by expectations, by traditions, by politics, by the weight of dynasties that treated them as pieces on a board. Their suffering was not chosen, it was inherited. Their tragedy was not deserved, it was imposed. And their stories remind us that history's greatest pain is often carried by those who never asked to be part of it. Imagine their footsteps now, echoing through empty palaces. Sisi, walking alone through long dark corridors, her dress dragging like a whisper. One is staring through a narrow window at a world she could touch but never reach. Marie Antoinette holding her children as the walls of Versailles shook with the rage of a nation. Alexandra wiping tears from Alexei's cheeks while soldiers outside sharpened their rifles. These moments are gone. But the echoes remain. Echoes of fear, echoes of love, echoes of sacrifice, echoes of bloodlines that demanded too much from the women trapped inside them, echoes of the cursed queens. And what do we learn from them? We learn that beauty cannot protect you, that love cannot save you, that power is never gentle, that royalty is never safe, that history is written by victories, but shaped by tragedies. We learn that even queens are human, women with fragile hearts, women who wanted simple happiness, women who hid their tears behind perfect smiles, women who were expected to be symbols instead of people. We learn that behind every crown is a woman who must bleed so that the world can believe in a fairy tale. But the fairy tale was never real. What was real is their pain. The world remembers their deaths, the assassinations, the prisons, the executions, the basement where the Romanovs fell. But their lives were more important than their endings. Sisi's poetry, Juana's devotion, Marie Antoinette's motherhood, Alexandra's faith. These are the pieces of humanity buried beneath the royal tragedies. Pieces that deserve to be remembered, not with judgment, but with compassion. Pieces that remind us that history is not made only by kings, it is shaped by the suffering of queens. And now their stories pass to us. Not as warnings, not as legends, not as tales of madness and downfall, but as reminders that power always has a price, and sometimes the price is paid by the wrong people. These women lived in palaces but died in sorrow. They held crowns but lost themselves. They loved deeply but were loved too little. Their stories echo through centuries, through gold halls, and broken mirrors, and cracked portraits, and forgotten rooms. They echo through the bloodlines that shaped nations and shattered hearts. They echo through us. Because in the end, history is not just about empires falling, it is about the people who were crushed when those empires fell. Sisi, Juana, Marie Antoinette, Alexandra, for queens, for lives, for tragedies intertwined by fate. Their crowns are gone, Their thrones are dust, their empires are memories, but their suffering lives on as a single truth, spoken softly across time. Even the most powerful women can be the most fragile. Even the brightest crowns can cast the darkest shadows. And sometimes, the greatest curses are born not from myths but from blood.